My name is Clara, and I'm 36 years old. I never imagined I'd be the sole heir to a $14 million fortune left by my estranged uncle. I was racing home, bursting with excitement to share this life-altering news with my husband Leo, when my entire world was shattered in a literal crash. I woke up in a hospital, my body a landscape of agony. Hours turned into days, but Leo was a ghost. He never came. When I finally managed to reach him on the phone, his words inflicted a wound far deeper than any of my physical injuries. Now, as I lie in this bed watching him walk into my room with his new wife, I never expected her to take one look at me and let out that blood-curdling scream. If you're listening to this, please hit like, subscribe, and tell me where you're listening from, as I recount how my life was torn to shreds and then pieced back together in a way I could never have foreseen. My connection to my Uncle Arthur was, at best, a tangled mess. He was my father's older brother, but a bitter feud over the family's old manufacturing business had driven them apart decades ago. The chasm between them was so profound that our families barely exchanged nods during the rare, tense holiday gatherings. Still, I held on to faint, cherished memories of visiting his sprawling country estate as a little girl. Those fleeting visits felt like stepping into a fairy tale. Uncle Arthur would show me his vast collection of antique maps and spin tales of his business adventures across the globe. He was a self-made titan, a man who had built a tech investment empire from the ground up. His business prowess was legendary in our hometown, but his personal life was a stark, empty canvas. He never married, never had children, and poured every ounce of his being into his work. What I didn't realize until much later was that he had been secretly following my progress through the years. "You have my fire, but a kinder heart," he'd told me once during a rare encounter when I was just a teenager. "Don't let anyone put it out." After I finished college and moved away, Uncle Arthur started sending birthday cards and occasional letters. I always replied, but my responses were brief and polite, unsure how to mend a family rift I hadn't created. His letters were filled with mundane updates about his life, sharp insights on the market, and probing questions about my own aspirations. I never understood he was meticulously weaving a connection with me, the niece he barely knew. 6 months before my accident, Uncle Arthur was diagnosed with a terminal illness. When I heard the news from a distant relative, I felt a pull to visit him in the hospital. I can still picture how frail he looked, a mere shadow of the powerful man from my childhood, yet his eyes ignited with light the moment I entered his room. "Clara," he said, his voice a fragile whisper, "I always knew you'd find your way back." That single visit blossomed into weekly ones. We spent hours talking about everything from literature to economics, desperately trying to make up for decades of lost time. He never once brought up the old feud with my father, and I never asked. It was an unspoken pact to start anew. "Life is far too short to harbor old resentments," he told me during one of our final conversations, a lesson I learned far too late. 3 months later, he passed away in his sleep. I mourned his loss with a depth that caught me by surprise. As for Leo, our love story began 7 years ago at a gallery opening downtown. I was there as a junior writer for a local magazine, assigned to cover the event. Leo was one of the featured artists, and his dramatic, twisting metal sculptures were the talk of the evening. He had this raw, magnetic confidence, and he spoke about his work with a passion that was utterly captivating. "Art is about bending reality," he'd said during our interview, "finding structure in the chaos." We started dating soon after, and within a year, we were married in a small ceremony we could barely afford. But it felt perfect. Leo was fiercely determined to make his name as a sculptor, and I supported his dream without reservation. I left the magazine for a more stable job at a marketing firm to ensure our bills were paid while he chased commissions and gallery representation. For the first few years, despite our constant financial strain, life was beautiful. We lived in a cramped apartment, saved every penny we could, and built our future on shared dreams. He would be in his studio late into the night, welding and grinding metal, while I sat at the kitchen table crafting marketing campaigns. We were a team, each playing our part. But the last 2 years had been different. Leo's career had stalled, and the constant rejection seemed to corrode something inside him. He grew sullen, withdrawn, and would often vanish for hours, offering no explanation. When I'd ask, he'd snap that he needed space to create, or was networking. Our savings dwindled as he funneled money into expensive materials for ambitious projects that never seemed to come to fruition. "You just don't understand the artistic process," became his default defense against any question about our finances or his whereabouts. I was at my desk at work when I got the call from Marcus Thorne, Uncle Arthur's attorney. "Clara Evans? This is Marcus Thorne. I'm handling the estate of Arthur Vance. Would you be free to come to my office this afternoon?" I agreed, assuming it was about some small keepsake or a final letter. When Marcus slid the will across his polished mahogany desk, the world seemed to stop. Uncle Arthur had left everything to me, his entire estate, valued at $14 million, plus the sprawling country property. "He amended his will after your reconciliation," Marcus explained gently. "He was deeply impressed by the life you'd built for yourself, on your own terms." Tucked inside the will was a handwritten letter from my uncle. "My dearest Clara, if you are reading this, then I've moved on to the next great adventure. I have watched you from a distance, admiring your spirit and your kind heart. You possess the same drive I once had, but you wield it with a wisdom I never did. This money is a tool, not an answer. Use it to build a life of joy, and always remember that true wealth is not measured in dollars. With all my love, your Uncle Arthur." I signed the necessary documents in a complete daze. $14 million. The number was so vast it felt unreal. We could pay off our debts. Leo could create his art without the crushing weight of financial pressure. We could buy a home, travel the world, start a family. The possibilities were dizzying. On my way out, I stopped at a specialty shop and bought a rare vintage camera for Leo, a piece he'd been dreaming of for years. It was meant to be a symbol of our new beginning. I decided I had to tell him in person. News this monumental deserved a proper celebration. I called him anyway just to say I was on my way home early with incredible news. He sounded distracted, almost irritated. "I'm sort of in the middle of something, Clara. A new piece. It's very demanding. This is important, Leo. I'll be home in 30 minutes. Fine, he sighed. "Just don't expect me to be thrilled." I'm in my creative zone. I hung up, a little deflated but still buzzing with excitement. I told myself his mood would instantly change once he heard what I had to say. I had no idea that brief, cold call would be one of the last normal conversations we would ever have. A light rain had just begun to fall as I turned onto the interstate, a gentle drizzle that made the asphalt shimmer under the gray afternoon sky. I remember humming along to some pop song on the radio, mentally rehearsing the big reveal. Maybe I'd have him close his eyes, place the camera in his hands, and then drop the news. I pictured the stress and frustration of the past 2 years melting from his face as he realized our struggles were over. I was so lost in this fantasy that I almost didn't see it happen. A large tanker truck in the far lane suddenly hydroplaned, its tires losing their grip on the wet pavement. Time seemed to warp and slow down. I watched in horror as it jackknifed, the massive trailer swinging toward me like a monstrous, metallic pendulum. I yanked the steering wheel hard to the right, a futile gesture. The impact was a deafening roar of crushing metal. My car spun like a top, and the airbag deployed with a violent punch to my face. Through the chaos, I remember seeing the box with the vintage camera fly open, the expensive device sliding across the dashboard in an impossible slow-motion ballet. My last conscious thought was bizarrely of a roadside billboard for a life insurance company. Its tagline read, "Protect what matters." Then everything went black. I woke up to the rhythmic beeping of monitors and that distinct, sterile scent unique to hospitals. My entire body throbbed with a pain so profound it felt like every cell was screaming. Breathing was a series of sharp, stabbing jolts in my chest. I tried to shift my weight and was met with a fresh wave of agony. "Easy there," a kind but firm voice said. "You need to lie very still." I forced my eyes open, focusing on the woman in blue scrubs standing by my bed. Her name tag read, Grace, RN. What happened? My voice was a dry, raspy whisper. "You were in a very serious accident on Interstate 84, Grace explained, her hands expertly checking one of my IV drips. "You've been unconscious for nearly 2 days. 2 days. The words felt like stones dropping into my foggy mind. My husband. Does Leo know I'm here? Grace's expression flickered with something I couldn't quite read. "We contacted the emergency number in your phone. We've left several messages." But he hasn't come? Even through the haze of medication, a cold knot of confusion tightened in my gut. "Not yet, but I'm sure he'll be here soon," she said, though her tone lacked any real conviction. Later that afternoon, a Dr. Daniel Foster explained the full extent of my injuries. 3 fractured ribs, a severe concussion, a compound fracture in my left leg that now contained a collection of surgical pins, and countless bruises and cuts. I was facing weeks in the hospital, followed by months of grueling physical therapy. "You were incredibly lucky," he said, his face serious. "The driver of the truck that hit you didn't make it." Lucky? I didn't feel lucky. I felt broken and utterly alone. I tried calling Leo's phone again and again, but every call went straight to voicemail. I sent a barrage of text messages that were marked as delivered but remained unread. With each passing hour of silence, my anxiety spiraled. Grace became my primary nurse and increasingly my lifeline. She'd check on me even when she wasn't assigned to my room, bringing me an extra pudding cup or just sitting with me for a few minutes when her shift allowed. "Still no word?" She asked on the 3rd day, gently helping me sit up in bed. I just shook my head, wincing as the movement sent pain shooting through my ribs. I don't get it. Even if his phone was broken, he'd know something was wrong when I never came home. On the 4th day, I finally got a text from Leo. "Heard about accident. Swamped with a breakthrough project. Will visit when things calm down." That was it. No questions about how I was, no offer of help, just a dismissal. "That doesn't seem right," Grace frowned when I showed her the message. "Do you have any friends who could go check on him?" I called my best friend, Chloe, but she was strangely evasive on the phone, stumbling over excuses for why she couldn't visit me yet. When I pushed her about Leo, she quickly and awkwardly changed the subject. By the end of that first week, a dark suspicion had taken root. Using Grace's tablet, I logged into social media and found something that made my blood run cold. Leo had posted a picture of himself at a high-end art gallery, an exclusive place known for its wealthy clientele. The caption read, "Celebrating New Beginnings." With trembling hands, I dialed his number again. This time, he picked up. "What?" His voice was sharp, annoyed, with loud music and chatter in the background. "Leo, I'm in the hospital. I've been here for a week. Where are you?" There was a pause. "Look, Clara, I'm in the middle of something important." "More important than your wife being in critical condition?" Another, longer pause. When he spoke again, his voice had shifted. It was cold, devoid of any emotion I recognized. "I don't have the time or the resources for a failure, Clara. Some of us are moving on with our lives." The line went dead. I stared at the phone in utter disbelief, hot tears blurring my vision. What did he mean, a failure? I had just inherited $14 million. More importantly, I was his wife, seriously injured but alive. Grace found me sobbing uncontrollably an hour later and immediately paged a doctor for a sedative. As the calming medication coursed through my veins, dulling the sharp edges of both physical and emotional pain, one thought kept circling in my hazy mind. Something was terribly, horribly wrong. The days after Leo's cruel phone call were the bleakest of my life. I barely ate, couldn't sleep, and cried until my body ached with a different kind of exhaustion. The pain from my injuries was nothing compared to the gaping wound of his betrayal. 7 years of marriage, erased with a single callous dismissal. Grace grew so concerned that she arranged for me to speak with Dr. Evelyn Reed, the hospital's psychologist. She was a petite woman with kind, intelligent eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, who offered no empty platitudes. "What you're experiencing is multi-layered trauma," she explained during our first session. "The physical trauma of the accident, the emotional trauma of betrayal, and the shock of sudden abandonment. It's completely normal to feel like you're drowning." "Did he know?" I whispered, the question hanging in the sterile air. "About the money, I mean." "What money?" Dr. Reed asked gently. I hadn't told a soul at the hospital about the inheritance. It had seemed irrelevant in the face of everything else. But now I wondered if it was the missing piece to this horrific puzzle. "I inherited $14 million the day of my accident," I explained. "I was on my way home to tell him when the crash happened." Dr. Reed's eyebrows shot up. "Well, that certainly adds a significant new dimension to the situation." 2 days later, Chloe finally showed up. She crept into my room like a thief, clutching a sad-looking bouquet of flowers and avoiding my gaze. "You look awful," she blurted out, then immediately cringed. "Sorry, that came out wrong." "Why have you been avoiding me, Chloe?" I asked, my voice flat. The cocktail of medications had stripped me of any patience for pretense. She sank into the visitor's chair, the forgotten flowers wilting in her lap. I didn't know what to say, Clara. "Everything is so messed up. Tell me what's happening with Leo." She started twisting her wedding ring, a nervous habit. He's with someone else now. A woman named Maya." The words felt like a second car crash. "What do you mean, with someone else?" "We're married." "He's been telling people you didn't survive the accident," she whispered, her own tears starting to fall. "He held a small memorial gathering at your apartment last week." I couldn't make myself go. The room started to spin. "He told people I'm dead." "While I'm lying here in a hospital?" Chloe nodded miserably. "I only found out you were alive when Grace called me yesterday. Leo blocked you from all his social media and changed the locks on the apartment." "Show me," I demanded, my voice a raw command. "Show me this woman." Reluctantly, Chloe took out her phone and pulled up a social media profile. And there he was, my husband, his arm wrapped around a slender, dark-haired woman. They were at a gallery, clinking champagne glasses, looking for all the world like a perfectly happy, established couple. Something about the woman's face struck a strange chord of familiarity. She was younger than me, perhaps in her mid-20s, dressed in expensive clothes, with features that seemed to echo my own in a peculiar way. "Her name is Maya Renaud. She's an assistant at the Artesian Gallery," Chloe explained. "They apparently met about 3 months ago." 3 months. The same time I had started visiting my dying uncle. While I was making peace with my family's past, Leo had been building a new future with this woman. A wave of nausea washed over me. "There's more," Chloe added, her voice dropping to a near whisper. "People are saying they got married last weekend. Some quick ceremony at the courthouse. Married. My husband had declared me dead and married another woman, all within days of my accident. The scale of the betrayal was so immense, so monstrous, that my mind couldn't fully grasp it. Grace, who had been hovering nearby, stepped in when she saw the sharp spike on my heart monitor. "I think that's enough for today," she said firmly, guiding a tearful Chloe toward the door. "I'm so sorry, Clara," Chloe called back. "I should have told you sooner." After she left, Grace sat with me, her quiet, steady presence a small anchor in the storm. "You need a lawyer," she said finally. "This isn't just a betrayal, Clara. This is fraud." She was right. With her help, I called Marcus Thorne the next morning. "Clara, I was beginning to get worried," the attorney said, his voice laced with concern. "I've been trying to reach you about some troubling developments." "Let me guess," I said, bitterness coating my words. "My husband has been asking about my inheritance." "More than asking. He came to my office last week claiming to be your next of kin. He said you had passed away in the accident. He had a marriage certificate and what looked like a death certificate, though it didn't hold up to scrutiny." "He's trying to steal my inheritance," I said, the pieces finally slamming into place. "It would appear so." "And he wasn't alone. He brought a young woman with him whom he introduced as your sister, claiming she had a right to a portion of the estate." "I don't have a sister," I said automatically, and then I froze. "What was her name?" "Maya. A French surname, Renaud." My mind was racing. The familiar face, the slight resemblance, the timing of her appearance in Leo's life, just as Uncle Arthur's health was failing. "Marcus, I need you to do a deep dive into this woman's background. And I need you to be here at the hospital tomorrow. I think my husband is about to make his next move, and I need to be ready." That night, sleep was impossible. My mind worked feverishly, piecing together the twisted fragments of this insane puzzle. How could Leo have known about the inheritance before I told him? Why would he pick a woman who looked so much like me for his con? And why did her face feel so familiar, beyond just a passing resemblance? By morning, a sickening theory had begun to form, one so outlandish I could barely allow myself to consider it. I asked Grace to help me set up a small, discreet camera in my room, explaining it was for security. Then, using Chloe's phone, which she had left with me, I sent a text to Leo. "I know about the inheritance. Clara's awake and she remembers everything. You need to fix this before she talks." The reply came back in under a minute. "We'll be there today to handle it." Delete this message. They were coming, and I was finally going to get some answers. I spent the morning steeling myself for the inevitable confrontation. Grace helped me arrange the pillows so I looked a bit more frail and vulnerable than I felt. Dr. Reed coached me through breathing exercises to maintain my composure. "Remember, you hold all the power here," she reminded me over the phone. "No matter what he says or does, he cannot take that from you unless you give him permission." Marcus arrived at noon, his briefcase in hand, and positioned himself in a chair near the window, out of the immediate line of sight from the door. The tiny camera Grace had installed was recording, its lens aimed squarely at the foot of my bed. "Are you sure you want to go through with this today?" Marcus asked, his brow furrowed with concern for my fragile state. "We can handle all of this through legal channels." "I need to see his face when he lies to mine," I replied, my voice steady. "I need to understand." At exactly 2 o'clock, a knock came at the door. My heart monitor betrayed my anxiety with a spike in its rhythm, but I kept my expression calm. Grace gave my hand a reassuring squeeze before stepping back near the ensuite bathroom. Leo entered first. He was wearing an expensive-looking sport coat I'd never seen. His hair was professionally styled, and a new watch gleamed on his wrist. The transformation from struggling artist to wealthy connoisseur was jarring. When he saw me, his expression wasn't one of surprise or relief, but of sheer annoyance, quickly papered over with a mask of false concern. "Clara," he said, his voice dripping with theatricality, "you're awake." "We've been so worried." "We?" I asked, my voice much stronger than I expected. He glanced back toward the doorway, gesturing for someone to enter. A slender figure stepped into the room, but she remained half hidden behind him, a shy, nervous presence. I could only catch a glimpse of dark hair and a designer dress. "You remember Maya, of course," he said smoothly. "Your cousin's daughter from out of town." I said nothing, just watched him as he moved further into the room, his confidence swelling. He'd always been a performer, a natural at playing whatever role suited him. Today, he had cast himself as the doting, worried husband. "The doctors said your memory might be..." Affected by the accident, he continued, his tone patronizing. So much has happened while you've been unconscious. Like you telling everyone I was dead? I asked quietly. His stride faltered for a fraction of a second. A terrible misunderstanding. When they first brought you in, the prognosis was grim. I was devastated. Some people misinterpreted my grief. And the new apartment? The gallery parties? The marriage license? His eyes narrowed. You've been listening to gossip, darling. That can't be good for your recovery. What's important now is getting you well and sorting out your affairs. He pulled a sheaf of papers from his jacket pocket. The doctors mentioned you might not be in a position to handle your finances for a while. I've brought some simple forms authorizing me to manage things on your behalf. I almost had to admire the audacity. If I had been more heavily medicated or genuinely confused, I might have fallen for it. But I could see the cold, calculating glint in his eyes, the impatience in his posture as he held out the papers. You mean the $14 million I inherited? I asked bluntly. His mask flickered. Surprise quickly covered. You remember that? Yes, of course. It's such a blessing, but a huge responsibility. In your condition, the stress of managing that kind of money could set back your recovery. How thoughtful of you to be so concerned. He smiled, mistaking my calm for compliance. I've always had your best interests at heart, Clara. Is that why you blocked my friends? Changed our locks? Told everyone I was dead? Leo's facade finally began to crack. You're confused. It's the medication. Show her the video, Marcus, a calm voice said from the corner of the room. Leo spun around, genuinely shocked. Who the hell are you? Marcus Thorne, Mrs. Evans's attorney, and you must be the husband who declared her dead to try and steal her inheritance. As Marcus spoke, he turned a tablet screen toward the foot of the bed, playing a security video from his office. It clearly showed Leo and Maya talking to a receptionist. Maya glanced up from the tablet screen and looked directly at me. Her expression shifted from nervousness to confusion, then to pure, unadulterated shock. Her face went deathly pale as our eyes locked. "Oh my God," she whispered, her voice trembling. "You're my mother." The room fell into an unnerving silence. Leo lunged toward her, grabbing her arm. "Shut up," he hissed. "Stick to the plan." But Maya was frozen, staring at me as if she'd seen a ghost. With a shaking hand, she fumbled in her handbag and pulled out a tattered, worn photograph. "I've been looking for you my whole life," she said, her voice breaking as she held the picture out for me to see. The image was of a teenage girl, her face partially obscured by shadows, holding a newborn baby, but it was unmistakably me, a photograph I hadn't laid eyes on in 18 years. One I thought had been destroyed. As I stared at the physical proof of my most deeply buried secret, the room began to spin. The monitor's beeping accelerated, a frantic rhythm marking the moment a puzzle I never knew existed slammed into place. My hands trembled as I took the photograph from Maya. The girl in that picture looked so young, so terrified, her eyes swollen from crying as she cradled the tiny infant she knew she would hold for the first and last time. "Where did you get this?" I whispered. "It was with me when I was adopted," Maya replied, her voice just as soft. "It was the only thing I had of my birth mother. I've carried it with me every day since I was old enough to understand what it meant." Leo made another desperate attempt to regain control. "This is ridiculous. She's clearly unstable and trying to manipulate you." "Be quiet, Leo," I said, my voice filled with a newfound authority that stunned everyone, myself included. "For once in your life, just stop talking." I looked back at Maya, truly studying her face for the first time. She had my mother's high cheekbones and my eyes. How had I missed it? Perhaps because I had spent 18 years actively trying to forget, to wall off the memory of the baby I had held for only a few fleeting moments. "I was 18, I began, my voice growing steadier as the words came. A senior in high school with a scholarship to college. My boyfriend at the time wanted nothing to do with a baby, and my parents were horrified at the scandal it would create in our small town. Maya sat on the edge of my bed, her eyes wide, hanging on every word. They sent me away to stay with a distant aunt for the pregnancy. After you were born, they arranged a closed adoption. They let me hold you once. Someone took this picture. I never knew they'd given you a copy. My adoptive parents said it was the only thing that came with me, Maya explained. They were amazing. They never hid the fact that I was adopted. When I turned 18, they gave me their blessing to start searching. And how did you find Leo? Marcus asked, his legal mind still working to untangle the conspiracy. Maya shot an uncomfortable glance at Leo, who stood by the window, rigid with fury. I didn't find him. He found me, she admitted quietly. He approached me at the gallery where I work about 3 months ago. He said he knew who my birth mother was. The pieces clicked into place with a sickening finality. The memory box, I said, looking directly at Leo. You found it when we moved last year. Leo's silence was a confession. I had kept a small wooden box with a few mementos from that time, a hospital bracelet, a tiny knitted hat, and my own copy of that photograph. I thought I had hidden it well, but clearly not well enough. He told me you had been searching for me, too, Maya continued, her voice filled with shame. He said you were wealthy but estranged from your family and that you wanted to reconnect but were afraid of rejection. And when did marriage come into it? I asked, unable to hide the acid in my tone. Maya's face flushed. It was a whirlwind. He was so charming, so focused on helping me find you. When he proposed 2 weeks ago, he said it would make you happy to see me settled with someone you trusted. It seemed romantic. And then I had my accident, I finished for her, and suddenly I was worth more to him dead than alive. Leo finally broke his silence. You can't prove any of this. It's all circumstantial, emotional nonsense. Marcus cleared his throat. Actually, we have quite a bit of proof, including your repeated attempts to access Clara's accounts with forged documents, and now this, a recorded confession of your entire scheme, not to mention the charge of bigamy, since you are still very much legally married to Clara. I don't get it, Grace interjected, speaking for the first time. Why go through all this? Why not just stay married to Clara and enjoy the money together? I looked at Leo, really looked at him, and saw him clearly for the first time. Because he never loved me, I said. I was a convenience, a steady paycheck while he chased his dream. But $14 million? That required a more direct plan. The will has a particular clause, Marcus explained. If Clara had passed away without any direct descendants, a large portion of the estate would have gone to charity. But with a direct heir, the entire inheritance stays in the family line, I finished. And as Maya's husband, Leo, would have complete control over those funds. Maya shot up from the bed, stumbling away from Leo as if he were radioactive. You used me. All those things you said about caring for me, about our future. Don't be so naive, Leo snapped, his true nature now on full display. It was a mutually beneficial arrangement. You wanted to find your mother, I helped. The money was just a bonus. By declaring me dead and fraudulently marrying my daughter, I asked, the absurdity of it all washing over me. Half the inheritance would have gone to her anyway once the connection was proven, Leo argued, his voice rising in desperation. I was just expediting the process. By committing multiple felonies, Marcus pointed out dryly, and potentially attempted murder, if Clara had died from her injuries without ever regaining consciousness. Leo's face hardened into a sneer. You can't prove that. We don't have to, I said quietly. You've done enough. I turned to Maya, whose entire world had just been shattered. I am so sorry you were caught in the middle of this. She wiped at her eyes. All my life, I dreamed of finding my birth mother. I never imagined it would be like this. Leo made a sudden move for the door. "This is insane. I'm leaving." "I wouldn't do that," Marcus said calmly. "Hospital security is waiting in the hall, and I've already filed preliminary charges. Fleeing the scene will just be added to the list." As if on cue, 2 uniformed security officers appeared in the doorway. Leo looked around the room like a cornered rat, searching for an escape that didn't exist. "Clara." He tried one last time, his voice shifting back to the gentle, pleading tone I had once loved. "We can fix this. Think about everything we shared." "That's exactly what I'm thinking about," I replied. "Officers, this is the man I told you about." As they led a sputtering Leo from the room, Maya and I were left in a strange, heavy silence, with 18 years of separation hanging between us like an invisible curtain. "I never stopped thinking about you," I finally said, the words feeling both monumental and completely inadequate. "Not for a single day." The days following Leo's arrest were a whirlwind of police statements, legal meetings, and emotionally charged conversations. Marcus worked tirelessly to unravel the tangled web of deceit Leo had woven, discovering that he had tried to access my bank accounts multiple times with expertly forged documents. He was meticulous, Marcus explained during a meeting in my hospital room. He even created a false paper trail, forging emails between the 2 of you to suggest you had discussed the inheritance with him before the accident. "How much trouble is he actually in?" I asked, not out of any lingering affection for Leo, but from a need to understand the full scope of his crimes. Fraud, forgery, attempted grand larceny, bigamy, and we're exploring conspiracy charges, given that he knowingly left you without medical aid after the crash. He's facing significant prison time. The whole thing still felt surreal, like a movie I was watching about someone else's life. 7 years of marriage, and I had never known the man I shared a home with. "What about the marriage to Maya?" I asked. "We're already filing for an annulment. Since your marriage to Leo was never legally dissolved, his marriage to her is null and void. The clear evidence of fraud and manipulative intent makes it an open and shut case." Maya visited me every day after the confrontation. Our first few meetings were tentative and awkward, punctuated by long silences and hesitant questions. How do you even begin to build a relationship with a daughter you gave up 18 years ago, especially under such traumatic circumstances? "Tell me about your parents," I asked during one visit. "Your adoptive parents, I mean." Maya's face softened. "They're the best. Dad's a high school history teacher, and Mom's a librarian. They always made sure I knew I was loved and wanted." "I'm so glad," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "That's all I ever wanted for you." "They want to meet you," she added cautiously, "when you're ready." "They never spoke badly of you. They always said you were just a kid who wanted me to have a better life than you could provide." Tears welled in my eyes. "They sound like incredible people. Why did you never look for me?" she asked, the question that had clearly been on her mind. I took a deep, shaky breath. Partly shame, partly because I thought a clean break was what was best for you, and partly I was afraid. Afraid of what? That you would hate me for giving you up, that you'd have questions I couldn't answer, that seeing you happy with another family would break my heart all over again. Maya reached out and gently took my hand. "I could never hate you. I have a million questions, sure, but I get it. You were a teenager in an impossible situation." Her forgiveness, offered so freely, broke something open inside me. For the first time since the accident, I wept without restraint, releasing 18 years of pent-up guilt and sorrow. Grace, who had been quietly checking my vitals, slipped out of the room, giving us space. While my emotional wounds were just beginning the long process of healing, my physical recovery was a slow, arduous journey. The surgeons had pieced my leg back together, but the road to walking again was long. Physical therapy sessions were agonizing, often leaving me exhausted and defeated. You're making excellent progress, Dr. Foster assured me. Many patients with your level of injury would still be bedridden. I have good motivation, I replied, glancing over at Maya, who had started attending my sessions to cheer me on. Marcus visited again, this time to discuss the future of the estate. Given the circumstances, I think it's time we discussed how you wish to manage the inheritance, particularly now that we know about Maya. I had been thinking about nothing else. Uncle Arthur left everything to me because he didn't know Maya existed. If he had known he had a great niece, he would have included her. So you wish to split the inheritance? Marcus clarified. Yes, 50-50. Maya, who had been sitting quietly, immediately protested. Clara, no. That money is yours. I wasn't looking for you because of money. I know that, I assured her, squeezing her hand, but you are my family, and I have 18 years of birthdays and holidays to make up for. 2 weeks after Leo's arrest, I had a visit from a detective, Laura Jennings, the lead investigator on the case. We found something concerning while executing the search warrant on your apartment, she said, placing a sealed evidence bag on my bedside table. Inside was a prescription bottle in my name for a medication I had never seen before. These are powerful sedatives, Detective Jennings explained. The prescription was filled 3 days before your accident. I've never had trouble sleeping, I said, completely bewildered. We're investigating the possibility that your husband was medicating you without your knowledge. A neighbor mentioned you seemed unusually tired and disoriented in the days leading up to the crash. The implication was chilling. Had Leo been planning to get rid of me even before he knew about the inheritance? Had the accident simply presented a convenient opportunity? We may never know what his full plan was, the detective admitted, but rest assured we are building a very strong case. As my discharge date neared, practical matters came to the forefront. I couldn't go back to the apartment, and a hotel was unsuitable for my ongoing recovery needs. You can stay with me, Maya offered. My place is tiny, but the building has an elevator. I couldn't impose like that, I protested. It's not an imposition. I want to help, she insisted. Then she added with a small smile, besides, we have a lot of catching up to do. Grace, who had become a true friend, had another idea. What about your uncle's estate? Marcus said it's just sitting there empty. The idea took root immediately. The country house from my childhood memories was now mine. It was a fresh start, far away from the city and the painful ghosts of my life with Leo. It's over an hour from the city, I mused. That's a long commute for you to the gallery, Maya. She looked down, fidgeting with the strap of her bag. Actually, I quit my job at the gallery last week. Too many bad memories of how Leo used me. What will you do now? She hesitated. I've been thinking. I want to go back to school. I've always wanted to study psychology, maybe help other adoptees and birth parents navigate reunions. The beautiful serendipity of the moment wasn't lost on me. The estate has plenty of room, I said. You could live there while you study, if you want. The look of pure hope that lit up her face was all the answer I needed. Somehow, out of the wreckage of my life, a new kind of family was beginning to form. 6 weeks after the crash, I was finally discharged from the hospital. A light snow had fallen overnight, blanketing the world in a pristine white that felt symbolic of our new beginning. The house was even grander than I remembered, a sprawling Victorian mansion with a wraparound porch. Marcus had arranged for it to be made accessible for me, with ramps, grab bars, and a temporary bedroom set up on the first floor. What do you think? I asked Maya as we pulled into the long, circular driveway. It's like something out of a storybook, she breathed, her eyes wide with wonder. Those first few weeks were an adjustment. We were biologically mother and daughter, but in every other way we were strangers. We circled each other carefully, learning the small, intimate details of each other's lives. I learned she was a morning person who sang off-key in the shower. She learned I was non-functional before my second cup of coffee. These small revelations were the bricks we used to slowly build a bridge between us. My physical therapy continued, and the pain slowly evolved from sharp and constant to a dull, manageable ache. I graduated from a wheelchair to a walker and then to a cane, each transition a small victory we celebrated with cupcakes from the local bakery. The emotional healing was slower. Dr. Reed continued our sessions via video call, helping me process not just Leo's betrayal, but the sudden, shocking reappearance of the daughter I'd spent nearly 2 decades grieving. Relationships forged in crisis can be intense, but fragile, she cautioned. Give yourselves time to build a real, sustainable connection. Following her advice, Maya and I created new rituals: Sunday movie nights, messy cooking experiments on Thursdays, and daily walks around the property as my strength returned. We talked for hours, filling in the 18-year gap in our shared history. One evening, about 3 months after we moved in, Maya brought up a subject we'd both been avoiding. "I'd like you to meet my parents," she said, "my adoptive parents." My stomach clenched with anxiety. "Do they hate me?" "No," she said firmly. "They always spoke of you with kindness. They understood." The meeting was arranged for the following weekend. I was a wreck, pacing the hall with my cane, worrying about what to say. But Mark and Diana Renault were exactly as Maya had described: warm, unpretentious people who greeted me not with judgment but with gratitude. "We always saw ourselves as your custodians," Diana told me over tea. "We were just keeping her safe until you could be in her life again. We're so glad that day has come." Their generosity humbled me. Instead of seeing me as a threat, they welcomed me into their family, and we made plans for holidays and future gatherings, our unconventional family expanding even further. The legal proceedings against Leo moved forward in the background. Seeing him in court, diminished and sullen in his orange jumpsuit, I felt not satisfaction, but a quiet relief that this chapter was finally closing. He was sentenced to 8 years for fraud and a host of related charges. "Do you still love him?" Maya asked me once after a difficult hearing. "No," I answered honestly. "I mourn the man I thought he was." But that man never really existed. He was a character Leo invented. As the seasons changed, so did we. We planted a garden that spring, and I found a deep, unexpected joy in nurturing new life. With Marcus's help, we established a charitable foundation in Uncle Arthur's name to support young single mothers and promote ethical adoption practices, creating something meaningful from my own painful past. Maya enrolled in university that fall, her passion for psychology shining through in everything she did. "You would have made a terrible artist's wife," she teased me one evening as we watched the sunset from the porch. "You're far too practical." "And yet I tried to be one for 7 years, I replied with a wry smile, "because you thought love meant sacrificing your own dreams for someone else's." Her insight was startling. "When did you get so wise?" I asked. "I had good parents," she said simply, "all 3 of them. I started writing, at first just for myself, but eventually with a purpose. My story, fictionalized but emotionally true, began to take shape. The process was cathartic, a way of transforming pain into art. One year, to the day after the accident, we had a small gathering at the estate. Grace, Marcus, Detective Jennings, Dr. Reed, Chloe, and Maya's parents, the people who had held us up through the darkness, were all there. Looking at their faces at this unlikely family forged in the fires of betrayal, I was struck by the strange, beautiful alchemy of life. "I'd like to propose a toast," I said, raising my glass, "to unexpected journeys and to the people who help us find our way." Later, after everyone had left, Maya and I sat on the porch steps. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked quietly. "The accident, Leo's betrayal, all of it?" I thought for a moment. Regret implies I'd choose a different path. And I wouldn't. Not if it meant I wouldn't have found you again. Leo's betrayal taught me a painful lesson about how money can expose a person's true character. but it also brought me my daughter and gave me a second chance at a relationship I thought was lost forever. Sometimes, the worst moments of our lives crack open a door for the best things to come in. The crash that broke my body led to the healing of my heart. The inheritance that made me a target also gave me the freedom to build a new life. As the first stars appeared in the twilight sky, I realized that true wealth had nothing to do with the millions in my bank account, and everything to do with the authentic, resilient love I had found in the aftermath of disaster. "What are you thinking about?" Maya asked, noticing my silence. "That sometimes," I said, "you have to survive the crash to finally find your way home." Have you ever experienced a betrayal that ultimately led to something positive in your life? I would love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this journey resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more stories of resilience and unexpected second chances. Share this with someone who might need a reminder that even our darkest moments can lead to a new dawn. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember that sometimes our greatest strength emerges from our most vulnerable moments. End of story.